that dominates, which has dominated the last 5 days. The widespread looting and rioting in English cities and towns. Lives have been lost, millions of pounds in damage caused, and for many also lost any assumption that our society is healthy and peaceful. David Cameron's even described some parts of this country as sick. So is he right? With me now, Katharine Birbalsingh, an author and former deputy head of a comprehensive school. Sheldon Thomas, who runs Targeting Against Gangs, an outreach mentoring scheme for gang members in London. Frank Field, the Labour MP and former welfare reform minister who was appointed by the Prime Minister as an advisor on poverty, joins us from Westminster. Katharine Birbalsingh, is David Cameron right to say parts of Britain are sick?
Well, I certainly think parts of Britain are broken, and it was the same phrase that I used about our education system. I think that we're seeing a breakdown of authority through the family. For instance, children are coming home with these goodies, and their parents are not turning them into the police to say, look, my child has been stealing. We're seeing a breakdown in terms of the education system. Behaviour is out of control in our classrooms, and it's something that we need to admit and recognise.
But his analysis was all about personal responsibility.
But
it pins the blame on the individual, is that right?
Well, absolutely. It is because we've allowed individualism and moral relativism to rule in our communities, where we don't take collective responsibility and personal responsibility, where children haven't been made to account for their behaviour, both good and bad. When a child misbehaves in school, we say it's the teacher's fault.
Sheldon Thomas, is Britain sick?
I wouldn't describe it as sick, but I would definitely agree with what Kathy is saying about we're in a broken society. We've got broken families, dysfunctional families. But I would go one step further. I would say that what we're looking at here is young teenage women having kids. And so what we are forgetting is that this society is actually practically allowed teenage girls to go out and get pregnant. I mean, we've got schools offering...
What do you mean allowed?
Let me put this... let me try and make correct that what I'm saying here. Basically, is what I'm saying is this. When you have a society promoting that it's okay for a young girl who of 12, 13, that you don't need to tell your parents that you're going to go on the pill.
Exactly.
I'm saying directly, you're saying fundamentally you are accountable for what that child's going to happen, what's going to happen to that child. What we're having here is the average age of a young girl getting pregnant isn't 25 and 26 anymore. We're talking about 15, 16-year-old girls getting pregnant, raising young kids into their home, who themselves are children, and now we're trying to expect children to raise children in a disciplined manner. I think we're kind of joking ourselves if we think that's going to happen.
Are all those looters and rioters entirely responsible for their own actions and thoughts, or do other things influence what they become?
Well, it depends again the age group, because if you're looking at a 10-year-old, 11-year-old, clearly if that 10-year-old's out late at night, you'll have to question what happened to the family. So if we're going to question what's going to happen to the family, then we're going to have to look at what exactly is that parent doing. Most of these kids are growing up with no fathers in the house. We can't turn a blind eye to that. And we can't certainly turn a blind eye to a society that has made so much cutbacks on jobs, apprenticeship schemes, funding in terms of youth centres where young people can go and...
OK, well, that's the government's responsibility then, isn't it? Katharine Birbalsingh. I mean...
That's true. However, the most important thing is education. And we need to get that right, first of all. We have 17% of our 15-year-olds who are functionally illiterate. If they cannot communicate with each other, they can't read and write, they can't live, they're not able to look at a building and appreciate its beauty or listen to a piece of music and enjoy it. They get bored easily because there's nothing to enjoy because they haven't been educated, and then they go out and loot.
Let me bring in Frank Field in Westminster. Do governments and what governments do have anything to do with what's going on?
They do, and I agree very much with the two contributions that we've already heard. The report that I did for the Prime Minister and gave him before Christmas said that we'd moved from a society which managed to combine freedom and order, largely because the country itself had a view about parenting, which was the model, if I put it crudely, about tough love. You set boundaries, children know the dangers of going beyond those, but within those you love them and try and promote their best interests. And what you've had described, there's been, in a sense, an attack on that model. Young people themselves know this, and to our inquiry, we had evidence from them saying they wanted to know how to be good parents. And we put proposals to the government, which they brushed aside, how we actually deal with this issue. The only way we can teach this on a universal scale when increasingly parents themselves don't know what the game is, as you've just had described to you, is actually through our schools. How do you do that? Not as a ghetto subject, but something which is taught throughout the curriculum. Now, the government feels this is a sort of fluffy issue to be put on one side, but if the Prime Minister is serious about, in the longer term, dealing with the issues we've seen in the last 3 nights on our television screens, we do actually have to go back to the building block of a safe, free and ordered society, and that is how we raise our children and how we equip people to do that.
It's one thing to say parents of children who get in trouble with the law must go on parenting courses. What you're talking about is something much more, much more wide-ranging than that. And you're saying the state should get involved in telling people how to raise their kids, even if they've done nothing wrong.
No. You see, you put it in this extreme manner, which is how the government feels they'll be under attack. The truth is, most people want to know how to be good parents, want to actually have good advice, want to have support. They're actually terrified in the position that they find themselves in.
Sheldon?
So we're not actually trying to impose anything on anyone. We're trying to make sure they have the facilities to actually learn that.
And I would even add to what he's just saying, because I totally agree with what he's saying. I would say that the young men that we work with gang members, they actually want to have discipline in their life. Exactly. They actually want to have structure. Yes. And I think that we are joking ourselves if we think for 1 second that it's okay for our society to continue the way it's going, where we have broken families, where we have fathers who are just disappearing at a drop of a hat, where we have a society where cutbacks have been so severe on single parents, so severe that they're being strangled on the very estates that they're at.
So can I actually come in on that? Because if I put that in more general terms, what we knew as a society was that if you had freedom without any restrictions, then in fact that quickly went into anarchy. And that actually to have clear guidelines on what the limits to freedom were was actually part of the freedom itself. And that's the art that we've actually lost.
But Katharine Birbalsingh, is the government really talking the language of gang members as victims? Gang members want more boundaries, they want more help, that their parents are victims.
No, I don't think
Sorry, I'm just talking to Katharine Birbalsingh a second.
No, I don't think they are. I think, unfortunately, some of the public do. Some people with important voices say the wrong things and encourage everyone, society, not to hold young people to account. And by doing that, it encourages them to behave in a lawless manner. We have to hold them to account for their bad behavior here, for their bad behavior in school, we have to hold fathers to account and make sure that they're in the homes with their children.
Catherine, can I come in on that? Because I think one of the very important lessons from this is for the government to learn. The immediate thing is, why didn't the police respond effectively to the immediate crisis? We need answers tomorrow on that. But in the longer term, it's the government that needs to learn that if it talks endlessly about a broken society, why doesn't it seriously get down to putting the building blocks in place so that we don't actually inherit even a worse situation
at the moment,
10 years hence?
The debate is so impoverished, is it not, that at the moment, if anybody talks about poverty, the living circumstances of any of these people, they are accused of excusing criminality.
No, I mean, there is an issue here, but most of my constituents, or many of my constituents are poor, but they don't use the guise of a riot to steal things off other people. So we're talking about a minority, whether they're poor or rich in these situations, and we should deal very toughly with them. There is this longer-term issue which all three of us contributors have been trying to address tonight, which is not politically correct to talk about, which we are actually addressing directly to
Sheldon,
the government.
Just briefly, what we've seen is people say, all these kids, they don't care about the police, they're not scared of the police, they're not scared of the sanctions, even if they're caught and go through the courts.
Yes.
What would bring them into line?
Well, I think one of the things that will bring them to line fundamentally is a stronger family unit. That's without any doubt in my mind. I think that for me, the work that I do...
If that doesn't exist, we're in a situation now where we've got to bring riots under control. But what do they do?
But right now, the courts, the criminal justice system doesn't work in line with what is happening here. Because we've got young men that have been found with a gun, and they've only given 15 months and not the 5 years that the police and everybody keeps saying. So there's a disparity in the criminal justice system and the sentences they give out. So clearly, if they don't actually action what they say they're going to do, then that's where the problem lies.
We must leave it there. I'm sorry to leave it on that as we begin another subject, but we will have lots of time, I'm sure. Yeah, well, there's been lots of agreement. Frank Field, Sheldon Thomas and Katharine Birbalsingh, thank you very much indeed for joining us.